Welcome to Fast Pace, the new growth, leadership and management podcast featuring Josh Phegan and Dean Mackie. We wanted to peel back the layers on what happens in the world of fast-paced real estate agencies, from new leadership models to the management challenges we all face each day. This is about a new era in the estate agency sector. Rapid changes to business models, service lines, remuneration and growth present the greatest opportunities that we've ever seen. Sit back, get inspired, grow your skills and reimagine what's possible with Fast Pace. Every Friday, wherever you get your podcasts, on Spotify, Apple Podcasts and Josh Phegan Digital.
Strategy, measure and adjust. We have this whole conversation that, we're going to set a great strategy, we're going to go and measure it, and then we're going to go and adjust. But what actually happens inside of business today is that we set a lot of strategies and we don't really have much measurement, and then we don't actually adjust. Or even worse than that, we have so many different numbers coming at us, we don't really know what to do with that data. One of the conversations is that could you actually run your business as a hypothetical on one number? Is there actually a very specific number that you know that if you just get that right, then everything else spins? Maybe, for example, as a salesperson, it might be the number of open for inspections you've got every Saturday. Maybe as a business, it might be the number of opens that are running. Maybe it might be the number of auctions that are being booked ahead. And these are often what we go to call forward indicators, giving us an idea about future fees and future income. Dean, talk to us a little bit about it. Is it too simple to think that maybe you could run an entire business off a very specific number, that if you just looked at that, then everything would be okay? Or are there a collection of individual numbers that, if brought together in more of a balanced scorecard, would actually allow you to be able to really get your business to perform in a very powerful way?
Good question, Josh. I think there's different times that different metrics apply. So, but I don't think in running an organisation that there's one number that rules them all. There's no, the whole Lord of the Rings things. There's no ring that rules them all. It just doesn't happen, right? In a business, but can be super effective for very specific activities. If you want to run the 100 meters, and there's it's a win-lose, you know what you have to do to achieve that. If you want to lose 10 kilos of weight, it's pretty specific. There it is, bang, it's 10 kilos, right? But if it's something else, if you're thinking about your organization, if you've got little sprints, yes, I think that they're really good, but there's a whole collective set of numbers and metrics that you need to consider to actually be running effectively, because otherwise, you end up running down a pathway at the expense of other things. And also metrics, you've got to be really careful too, because they can also be manipulated and all sorts of stuff. So I sort of look at it and I go, well, before you think about what are the numbers that are important, again, you've got to stop off and say, well, what is it I'm trying to achieve? And there might be a whole range of initiatives that you need to set off and achieve, and you might then be able to set a specific number or KPI or metric for those specific activities. And I think that that's what it's all about. So getting clear about why you're doing it, and also understand not just your business. I think you probably, when we set numbers, you've got to understand what's going on in the marketplace. So it's not always backward focusing. A lot of people make the mistake of only, I've got to beat last year. And it's not always about last year, because that's also a trap that people get into. I think it can be a bit more around understand what's going on in the market, what's going on outside of your business, what are the macroeconomic factors, also what are benchmarks. Perhaps you need to look at some benchmarks for your business versus others, because otherwise what I think people do is they look at things, and I always talk about the map versus the territory. And the territory is everything that's out there, and you might just be looking at a small part of that. And in doing so, you might actually be setting the wrong goals or the wrong metrics to begin with. So I think you've got to have a bit of a wider sort of view of the world, so that your decisions are taking into account the future, not just the past. So. There's lots of things out there, Josh. People sometimes, and I know a lot of people measure NPS, and I think NPS is a really good measurement if you think about it.
Yeah.
NPS is really important for businesses. It's probably not important for an electrical company, but because NPS is all about referring, right? Are you willing to refer type stuff, right? So for our business, it's probably useful to be having some measurement of NPS, but NPS as an overall score can actually also be misleading, because NPS, different parts of the process, if you're not measuring it, or getting all grouped up into one score, can actually just be misleading. So there might be NPS scores at different parts of the process and different parts of the cycle that you're actually dealing with a customer, and they might actually be quite different. So you've got to be careful as well to make sure that you're not just grouping everything up into one, but you also need to have flexibility to drive depth into each of those KPIs. So I think that one number to rule them all is oversimplifying what you need.
So Dean, sometimes I look at like social media and I look at the metrics that you can get out of that, and man, I'm just confused. Like I don't know what to actually do with it. Like what's the next thing? Am I looking at clickbacks, click forwards, saves? What does that actually look like? But yet inside of a business, often if you have a look at a car, for example, and you're driving in a car, there's a couple of things that I look at. So the first key one is obviously the speed, and then all of a sudden if the engine's all of a sudden revving ridiculously, I'll look at the rev meter, and all of a sudden if the car's performance is lagging, I'll look at the hot and cold, and all of a sudden if I see a little orange light come on, I know I've got to go and get petrol. In the old days, soon that'll just be all the electric stuff. The interesting thing is that you have a cluster of numbers that you look at that actually can give you some indicators about where things are at. So for example, you might look at market share, but is it actually profitable market share? You might have a conversation around, okay, great, what's our top line revenue? But yeah, what's actually happening in terms of our expenses at the moment, and what does that look like in terms of bottom line profit? And knowing that at different stages in the business, you're going to be doing different things, to be buying things that aren't necessarily going to be profitable initially, but there's going to be a bit of a period before that payback period actually comes in, in terms of investment. So Dean, I think it's really important. If you are a business leader, what are some numbers that you tend to say, look, these have a bit more of an emphasis for me in my business overall to know that we're being successful?
Again, Josh, it just depends on the cycle of where we're at. Exactly what you just said. Like we know if we're in certain parts of our business and we're looking for organic growth in our rent roll, we're prepared to invest in that. We keep track of very, very, very clearly on what the investment is in that, because obviously you'll be running at a loss typically if you're actually going for organic growth. Maybe the profit number is not as important to you. So and then there are other parts of the business more mature, and you're wanting to maintain or possibly, what it might be, but you're actually more focused on what's the bottom line, And I look at a lot of real estate firms, and I go in, and sometimes they've got a small rent roll, and they're not making any money from it. They don't even know they're not making any money from it, but they don't care because they're actually just trying to build an asset. So and often in those cases, people just are unclear, And even within a business, I see that there are some real estate firms that still run their property management and sales under one P&L. There's no way to get visibility on it, right? So I think, it depends on your objectives, and you are right, Josh, to go out and get market share in some markets, it might cost you a bit to do it. In some cases, it's actually, you might make more money if your business declines, but it's because you might be spending money on all this stuff to maintain it. So you've got to understand where you're at in each part of the cycle and what you need to invest in, because sometimes you've got to go and invest in infrastructure to get to the next stage. Now, if you might not invest in the infrastructure to get to the next stage if you aren't clear about what does the next stage look like. So I'm not trying to avoid your question on what we measure, but I think there are different things that you need to be measuring all of the time in different parts of the business, depending upon your specific business plan, right? And so I think.
So this allows strategic movement, right? So if I look at it and I say, okay, great, for a salesperson, one of the things I tend to look at is can I get them into momentum and being exposed to customers? And a great measurement of that is their minimum number of opens on a Saturday. So if someone, for example, has got 5 opens on a Saturday, their business is probably pumping. If they're at 0 or 1 or 2 and then back to 0, 1 or 2, there's a lot of energy that's being burnt there. But then the next measurement is, they've got to be under 28 days on market, because I don't want you opening the same proproperties all year. You've actually got to have different campaigns.
Yeah, all those things are really, really important. I mean, they're basics, Josh. I would mention those because that's pretty simple stuff, right? We need to be measuring, all of that stuff, and that's really important for all your employees, and not just your salespeople, but your property managers and all that sort of stuff. You need to have a way to link their performance and their behaviours to the performance of the business, right? So you've got to get clear. So, obviously it's the end of financial year. I mean, this might hit in the new financial year, but everyone's in business planning mode, right? So it's like, okay, how do you do that? Well, you can have a top-down approach or a bottom-up approach or both, right? But we've got to get really, really clear on what are the numbers, because if you're going to go out and say, okay, well, this is the revenue line we're going to chase. Well, what's the impact on the bottom line, and what's everybody's part in that? So every single agent in our business will have a very, very clear business plan that we know exactly what it is that they set to achieve. Now that then if you then re-engineer that or reverse engineer that, I should say, you then go, okay, well, this is how many listings I need to carry. This is how many appraisals I need to be doing. So that's not one KPI though. There's a whole bunch of series of metrics that sit below that you know if you're getting further away or closer to your goal. So we can pretty pretty much clearly see if an agent's likely or unlikely to be able to hit their next quarter's target based upon the activity they had in the preceding quarter. And so being focused on that really hard is super important. It's the same thing for our BDMs and the same thing for our property managers. They've got KPIs that sit there that they're linking back to your overall business plan. So they all come together to achieve an outcome, but there won't be one outcome. There's often multiple outcomes. So, I think, you mentioned balanced scorecard before. I think it's important to have a whole set of financial metrics in your business that are important to you for whatever your strategy is. You need to be really clear about what is it that you're going to choose to excel at and set some goals and metrics around that. Also, we actually focus really hard on innovation and improvement. So what are the tools we're bringing to bear to improve our business? What does our customers think about what we're doing? You need to have a way to know what that looks like, including your internal customers and your external ones. And making sure, like I just said, that your performance of your individuals are linked to your company objectives. And so I think all of those things together will sort of set your business up for success.